This is the You Ask, the Pros Answer podcast. Do you have questions about an upcoming exterior contracting project? We've got answers. Welcome to the You Ask, the Pros Answer podcast. Hey, welcome to the You Ask, the Pros Answer podcast. Your questions answered by the pros you trust. My name is Cole. I'm part of the marketing team at Pro Exteriors. I'm also one of the hosts on the show. And joined today, as always, I have with me Aaron Rogers. He is the owner and president of Pro Exteriors. Aaron, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful, Cole. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well. We are recording this on a Thursday in late-ish October. My kids actually have off school tomorrow, so we're kind of looking forward to them having a day off.
Yeah.
Your boys are homeschooled, right?
We do homeschool the children, yes. Well,
So
let me take that back. My wife homeschools our children.
Okay.
Yes.
We did that a few years ago, and bless her, because
Yeah.
my kids are at the age now, and I know your boys are too, at least most of them, where their homework exceeds my level of intelligence. And so I feel like when they have a day off school, I get a break as well, because the homework stops for a little bit.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much stuff we learned in school that just like goes away really quickly. And
Yeah. My wife handles the homeschooling. I handle everything outside of the house. I support the household. She supports inside the household. I like to say that I could never in a million years do what she does, and she would never do or want to do what I do. So that's why it works.
Yeah, it works. Yeah, I'm thinking through lots of things because my wife also works a full-time job, and it's a lot. But
yeah.
All right. So, audience, if you found the show recently and you're wondering what have I stumbled upon, the concept is pretty simple. Each week we tackle a question that we've been asked by someone like you, maybe one of our customers, maybe it's a question we've had in the past too, as a homeowner or consumer. This week is no different, but I want to start before we jump into the actual question. Just start with a short story. Aaron, you know this. I grew up north of Baltimore, Maryland, not really a coastal town. And yet it seemed like every hurricane season, we ended up with at least one storm that came up the East Coast. And, to varying degrees, we would have to prepare for it in some ways. Sometimes it was just an inconvenience. Sometimes it was just heavy rain, maybe a little bit of wind. There were a few times, though, where I can remember it being like a legit storm coming up the East Coast where we had to prepare things. But specifically in 2018, my family and I were we had purchased my grandparents' house from them. It was built in the early 1960s, 2-story house, pretty structurally sound. It tended to flood in the basement whenever we got even just a sprinkle. So I guess it really wasn't that structurally sound. With that said, March 2nd, 2018, it was a Friday. Hurricane Sandy had come up the East Coast. We weren't really expecting to get much. And then all of a sudden it was like that day, the forecast changed and incredibly high winds were forecast.
Yeah.
We really didn't have time to do much. I remember our kids came home from school. We were in the house. Our neighbors from across the street came over, knocked on the door and said, "Hey, we have this massive tree in our front yard. It looks like it's about to be uprooted. You might want to move your car." I had parked on the street, and it would have been right in line with where the car was.
Wow.
And sure enough, just a little while later, we heard this giant crash. It felt like an earthquake. We looked out front. Later on, well, not later on. When I edit this, I want to throw some pictures up, but the tree went across the road, landed about 1.5 feet from our front door, nearly took out our whole house. But
wow.
We lost a porch screen door. We lost some siding. It took, a while to be able to get the tree removed from the front yard.
Yeah.
A lot of that we couldn't have really prevented. It was an older neighborhood, so the trees were mature. uh, the combination of heavy wind and heavy rain was like the perfect storm for trees to come down. So in that instance, I don't know how much we could have done to prevent things,
Right.
prevent damage. But for those of us watching where maybe a storm is not imminent, what are some of the things that we can do to prepare our house for an upcoming storm?
Yeah. So I guess it's going to depend on exactly what the severity is. So here in southern Delaware, we are right on the coast. If I was to, as the crow flies, we are probably from our office 4 miles to the
Mm-hmm.
coast. Yeah, I'd say about 4 miles. Um, and you would think that because of that, that hurricanes are a huge, ginormous threat here. It's this really odd thing that a lot of the hurricanes that kind of come up from the coast, once they hit the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, they really kind of just dissipate. So, knock on wood, although hurricanes are like a constant threat every hurricane season, Delaware really doesn't really get impacted all that well. In fact, like with Hurricane Sandy, like we had a good amount of flooding and things like that, but as far as the actual local impact from that storm, it was minimal.
Mm.
North of us, like New York, New Jersey, they got hit pretty hard, but for some odd reason, Delaware just kind of escaped any sort of severe damage. But we have had massive storms here in the past. I think 1962, there was a hurricane that came through and it wiped out almost the entire town of Rehoboth, did a whole bunch
Mm.
of damage in Ocean City and whatnot. Uh, but yeah, so depending on the severity of the storm, there are things you can do, and then there's just some things that Mother Nature is a force to be reckoned with. So there's a couple of different things to consider. You're talking about protecting your home. You're also trying to protect, anything you have going on the outside of your home as far as, furniture, ornaments, and all that stuff. It's not just obviously to protect your stuff, but anything on the outside of your home that's not kind of secured becomes a projectile. So if you like your stuff, protect it. If you like your neighbors, and you want their stuff to also be protected, maybe protect your stuff for that reason as well. So, in the most simplest things you can do is, if you have, say, outdoor patio furniture, if you have the ability to kind of put that inside, then, go ahead and secure that. You put it in your garage and your shed. If you don't have a place to put it, then essentially, kind of put it in a centralized location. If you have the ability to kind of strap it down in any sort of fashion, I would go that route. Things like trampolines. You should have a trampoline secured as soon as you put it up. Anybody who's ever installed a trampoline in their backyard for their kids and didn't strap it down, and the first real windstorm you get, you realize that trampolines are actually ginormous frisbees. I made that mistake. I did what most fathers do, where I was like, it'll be bad. I'll get the straps ordered and then we'll do it. I think we had it for 2 months. And like a 30-mile-an-hour windstorm came through, literally picked it up, slammed it back down. And that was the end of that trampoline. So replaced it begrudgingly and strapped it down that second time. So trampolines, strap them down. They are really annoying frisbees flying through the air. So uh, you can talk about stuff like boarding up the outside of your house. Yeah, if a storm's going to be really bad, you can board up your windows, you can board up your doors. But if it's a normal storm, you're not going to get hit with a huge Category 5 hurricane with direct impact. Doing small things like literally just locking your windows, making sure they're closed, locking them. Same thing with doors, storm doors, screen doors. They don't have the most secure locking mechanisms. So if you have the ability to lock them and also kind of secure them with like an extra little eye hook or something, always suggest that. Um, Anything on the outside of your home that is not currently secure. So let's say you've got a piece of siding that, has been kind of lingering there. You see it's not locked in. Now's a great time to go ahead and get that taken care of. If you think that you have some issues on your roof, like right now, we're kind of hitting a little bit of a dry spell locally. We haven't had rain here in probably 3 weeks plus. It doesn't look like there's any rain in the forecast for the next several weeks. We've had some winds. I know that there's some people right now that have lost shingles in the last couple of weeks, but they haven't really made it a priority to get that fixed. As soon as we have rain, I guarantee you it will be a priority. So if you have issues on the outside of your house, go ahead and get them taken care of now if you see the storm has the potential to hit your area. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the easy stuff. If you want to go further than that, there's things like if you have a lot of trees in your yard and you have like kind of some branches that need to be taken care of at some point, now's a great time to go ahead and take care of it. If you have branches that are kind of leaning over your house, if you have branches that may or may not have been damaged previously and you never really had them taken care of, you get a good size hurricane hit your area, and those are going to be an issue. There's a lot of manufactured home communities locally.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may or may not understand that manufactured homes don't have solid foundations. Some of them may look like they sit on a foundation, but the foundation is kind of more aesthetics only. So there's a thing where I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I'm sure you can find the photo of it. But if you look up how they secure manufactured homes down in Florida, they actually take like these ginormous rods, they drill them into the ground, and they put like ginormous like ratchet straps over the actual home. It's a pretty common thing down there, not so much here. But yeah, so if you have the ability to ratchet strap your house to the ground, I highly suggest doing that. So
one of the things, you mentioned that hurricanes aren't as big a deal on the coast of Delaware, like it might have been even where I grew up in Baltimore County. However, when I lived in Delaware, I lived in a neighborhood where, because Delaware is so flat, there's no mountains, hills to break up winds.
Yep.
The straight line winds just seem to be constant.
Yeah.
My family lost a trampoline that was staked down to the ground.
Yeah.
And I woke up one morning, looked in the backyard, and I thought, our yard looks a lot more open than it did last night when I went to bed. It was in the cornfield across the street from my house. Anyhow, I just mentioned that because we are a people that I don't want to say we're lazy or procrastinators, but there are other things in our lives, kids, schedules, jobs, that tend to take priority over the routine maintenance. And routine maintenance is not a fun thing to spend money on.
Yeah.
We talked last episode about the importance of getting a roof inspection.
Yeah.
I feel like this is just another reason why you want to have your roof inspected, right? I mean, it can bring to light some things that are hiding before you end up with a major rain event or.
Yep. We deal with quite a bit of that when a storm is approaching and it's looking like we're going to get a pretty good hit. I mean, for us, it's going to be more like nor'easters. We get a lot of nor'easters here. We didn't have tornadoes until a handful of years ago. We all of a sudden started getting tornadoes in Delaware, which was a completely new phenomenon. We deal with a really fair amount of wind. We deal with a lot of flooding simply because we've got the bay. We've got the bay and the ocean right here at the coast. So we deal with a lot of like the back bays get flooded pretty good. So we deal with a lot of that. But the winds are what we deal with most. Like you said, Delaware's flat. We don't really have a lot of obstructions.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the developments, like similar to the development that you used to live in when you were here in Delaware, that at one point was just one big farm field.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them that do have woods, they pretty much clear cut those woods in order to put the developments in. So when you remove those barriers, the wind has a direct shot at your house. So we get a fairly large influx of calls when we have a pretty good size, like named storm pending. We start getting an influx of people that are essentially like, hey, I know I have an issue going on with my roof, or I know I have some siding that's an issue. Can you get it done prior to the storm? And as much as we like to say, like, absolutely, we can help you out. We will put active projects on hold if possible in order to kind of assist with storm related issues, either like the prevention of or the kind of the cleanup after.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't always have the capability to get to everybody that calls in. So waiting to the last minute, I mean, we're all guilty of it. But if you have an issue with your roof, the cheapest time to get it fixed is right now. The longer you wait, the more likely you're going to have some other issues that are going to kind of go along with that. Sheathing damage, interior damage, insulation damage, drywall, paint, carpets, potentially hardwood floors. None of those things like to get wet. So when you have an issue, the best time to fix it is right now. So as soon as you notice there's an issue, get it taken care of. So
is there we've done an entire episode on windows, but as it relates to storms, are windows wind rated? Is there something that you can find on the packaging or the marketing material
yes.
that I could look at to know?
Yeah, so you're going to kind of have like a standard for window ratings, and then you have another rating called a DB rating. So here on the coast, a lot of the towns will have a minimum requirement for DB ratings within 1 mile of the coast. It's called the coastal wind zone. So you'll have these DB ratings, which is something we go by. But a lot of times, if you want upgraded glass, you can speak to the individual window manufacturers, and they can give you like specific wind loaded or impact resistant, or some people call them hurricane proof, wind proof windows. But it does come with a considerable cost. Back in the let's see here. So I've been in the industry a long time, so sometimes I get my years wrong. I would say in the early 2000s, kind of right as I was beginning my career, there was a code recent that kind of came down the line in a lot of our coastal towns here, where they actually required those hurricane rated windows. Hurricane rated windows were like not kind of a big thing, outside of like Florida, where pretty much all the window manufacturers kind of make those hurricane rated. Up and down the coast, it wasn't quite as prevalent. A lot of manufacturers didn't offer that. And because it wasn't like a normal window, anytime you go outside of the norm of product offerings, the cost just skyrockets. So you had people that were building brand new construction, beachfront, oceanfront homes, that their window packages went from say $15,000 or $20,000 back then, where it could be $40,000 or $50,000 for the same windows and doors. Then they relaxed that requirement a handful of years later, and went to the way you could get around that was you could. This is so dumb. Oh gosh. So you could get around it by you could have your normal wind rated windows and doors, but you had to have permanent plywood bucks cut and on site during the inspection. So when you get your rough inspection, they inspect the framing, the roof has to be put on, the windows and doors have to be put in, the house wrap has to be fully installed, and then all like your rough electrical, rough plumbing, and all that stuff has to be installed. So during that rough inspection, they would look, and you had to have an individual piece of plywood cut and prepped and ready to cover your windows and doors. That was the way to get around that code. So dumb, but you can imagine how frustrating it could have been for somebody who built their house, say 2 years earlier, and paid $40,000-$50,000 for windows, and then their neighbor's like, "Oh, I paid $25,000 for mine, but I paid an extra $500 for plywood to be cut."
Yeah.
So very, very frustrating. So the code's a little bit more relaxed now. They just have like certain DB ratings that certain towns require. But yeah, that it's kind of the same thing with your U factor and your solar heat gain coefficient factor. All of those ratings are pretty much right on the window itself. I believe it's federally required for all that stuff to be listed on every single window. But yeah, so there are wind ratings.
On the coast near us, people will. It's a transient area where people move in and move out pretty often. If somebody's just moved into a new home or new to them or a condo right on the beach, is there a way for them themselves to check out? I mean, I know you just mentioned it can be on the window, but
Yeah.
uh, if that house or condo's 30, 40, 50 years old,
Yeah.
is there what would you recommend to them? Because I can
Well,
imagine a contractor coming in and replacing a window with the cheapest window they can find. And
correct. Yeah.
I don't know, what words of advice do you have to that person?
So realistically, if your house is say pre 2001, chances are you have almost zero wind rating in your windows. You may have at one time, but like everything, wind does a number on seals and the strength of things over time. So anything built pre 2001 most likely is no longer really going to have any sort of wind rating left to it. Um, as far as being able to look at the window, you will be able to look at a window and tell whether or not it's regular glass or tempered glass. But as far as looking at it and figuring out whether or not it has a wind rating, it's unlikely. Uh, there are some manufacturers, better manufacturers outside of like the vinyl window craze that became mainstream. Some of your nicer manufacturers, a lot of them are like wood windows that they may have aluminum capping or vinyl capping on the outside, but they're essentially a wood window. A lot of those will have etchings in the glass. You
Mm.
may be able to find the etching, and it may give you some information from there. Outside of that, like we talked about in the episode where we talked about windows, there is a sticker in the top sash of your window. Um, Sometimes it's not in the top sash. Sometimes it could be. If you have like a casement window or an awning window, sometimes it can be on the actual sash itself. That may have some information on it. If it doesn't have any information on it, but you have that little tag, a lot of times you can take that information and source that to the actual manufacturer.
Mm.
And that may be able to get you the information you're looking for. But honestly, anything pre 2001 is unlikely to have any sort of coastal wind rating of any kind. So, I mean, we deal with there's some pretty old condos here locally. I know that at one point in oh gosh, where was it? It was just south of the Indian River Inlet Bridge. We worked on a building where we literally it had a flat roof on it. We put all kinds of framing on it and then put a trussed roof on it, so it ended up having shingles on it. But that was condos. But that building used to be an old motel, and I want to say it was built in the late 40s, early 50s,
Mm.
and a bunch of those units literally just had like the living room window was like 5 foot by 5 foot, and it was just single pane plate glass. Like there's no wind rating for that. Um, and it's odd because, like I said, we had a massive storm here in '62. It was probably the most devastating storm we've ever had here locally. Like I said, wiped out hotels, wiped out like a whole bunch of beach houses. Rehoboth was just devastated. Um, a lot of the houses between south of Dewey Beach and north of the Indian River Inlet Bridge, there used to be a whole bunch of houses and little kind of like cottage shacks and motels and hotels there. All of those went away. So it was devastating. But some of these buildings are older than that, and they lasted through that. Uh, but yeah, so it's if it's older than 2001, I I highly doubt you have any sort of wind rating.
What about roofing and siding materials? Are wind ratings part of that? Uh, those
Absolutely.
materials?
Yep.
Okay.
Pretty much every current manufacturer will have a wind rating. It's one of the number one things. It's a selling point. Um, Most of the shingle manufacturers will dictate a certain wind rating. Three tabs, I believe, is like a 90-mile-an-hour wind rating. Normal architectural shingles is going to be like 110 ish. Some of them are 130. Um, GAF Timberline HDZ shingles has a unlimited wind warranty. Again, the dirty truth about wind warranties is that if a named hurricane storm comes through and causes storm damage to your roof, your insurance company is going to be on the hook for that versus the manufacturer. Uh,
Because that's considered an act of God from a insurance.
It's considered storm damage. It's not considered a failure of the material. Mm-hmm. So even with those wind ratings, every single roofing material will have that wind rating. Some of them are more important. There are some cities up and along the coast that you are not allowed to have, like in Florida. A lot of those houses, when you go to replace your roof, you're not allowed to put shingles back on because the wind rating is just too low. So that's why when you go down there, you see so many houses that have, terracotta tile, the concrete, a lot of metal roofing. There's a lot of options on the market. A lot of them used to be super, super expensive. They're still more expensive than asphalt shingles, but the pricing has really, really kind of dissipated and come down over the years to make it a little bit more affordable. But those roofing materials will last a lot longer as well. Asphalt shingles have laminate shingles have a 50-year warranty on them now, which, it's still up for debate, because I will tell you that I personally have never ripped off a 50-year asphalt shingle. I want to say the oldest asphalt shingle I've ever personally touched, and the only reason I can prove this is because they had the original invoice from when they had the roof installed, and it was like 37 years old, and it wasn't leaking, and it wasn't in terrible shape, but they were concerned that it was that old, and they knew it was only a 30-year shingle. So they were like, we just want to deal with it so it doesn't become an issue, which I agreed with their assessment. But the shingle manufacturer, which I can't recall at the time what it was, but they were no longer in business. But they had an invoice. This would have been 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that. Okay. They had the original invoice, and if I remember correctly, they paid like $1,150 to have their roof replaced.
My goodness.
And I literally, my jaw dropped, because I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, it was, it was like asphalt shingles. I think the invoice it had it broken down between materials and labor. And I want to say the asphalt shingles it was like $500, $600 for the materials. I was floored. It was ridiculous. So, and like I said, my father was a contractor, and I saw some crazy invoices from, the couple of years prior to when I started my company of, stuff he had done in the late 90s and replacing roofs for, $2,000, $2,500. And I was just, I scratched my head, because I was like, there's, how do you stay in business? Like charging that. So yeah, so it's pretty funny. 37 years ago, $1,100. It's crazy.
Yeah. So. Well, I remember buying gas for, I think, 99 cents a gallon, maybe, when I was a junior in high school.
Yeah.
And, that was 2002 or so.
Yep.
Am I correct in thinking that a wind rating with regards to siding and the roof is only as good as the installation?
Everything is 100% based off the installation. The installation is the most important part, because you can take the most expensive and the cheapest materials and put them side by side. And if the install is poor, it doesn't matter the quality of the product. 95% of 95% of all shingle issues, either repairs that need to be made or shingle failure in general, 95% of those issues are nailing alone. So when you look at how an asphalt shingle is supposed to be installed, the nail placement is like the most crucial thing. Mm-hmm. You can screw up a lot of things, but the nail placement is the most important thing. A couple of manufacturers have started to kind of make it a little bit more idiot proof. GAF a handful of years back came out with their new wider nail zone. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, we have a common bond, which is still only about 3/4, 5/8 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch. That's the only part of the asphalt shingle for a laminate shingle that's doubled up. So it was always taught, my whole career was always, you have to nail through the common bond. And then manufacturers started to kind of get a little bit more laxed and realized that almost every shingle is installed with a pneumatic nailer. And speed is like the number one thing for most of the crews. They want to try and get every roof done in a day. So when you're using pneumatic nailers, it's no longer like, you put the nail exactly where you want it and bang it down with a hammer. So it's really hard to screw it up when you're hand banging. But when you use a pneumatic nailer, it's all the way across that shingle, and you're trying to do it in a straight of a line. But when you're only trying to hit, 3/4 of an inch on a shingle that's 13 inches wide, you can miss.
Yeah, and you're doing it on a slope. It's not like
yeah, yeah. Let's not even forget that it's also hot. You're covered in crap. A little unknown fact for most people is a lot of times when shingles sit in the yard and they get wet, they smell a lot like cat pee. This wasn't an issue. Shingles used to be wrapped in like recycled paper. Almost all of them were wrapped in this like brown paper. It was amazing. The only issue is as soon as those bundles got wet, the paper just deteriorated and the bundles fell apart. So they started wrapping everything in these plastic bundles. Well, the plastic doesn't allow any of that moisture to get out of the bundles. So a lot of times, like, you smell like cat pee. Or at least, I mean, for all of you roofers out there that may or may not be listening to this, tell me I'm wrong. Drop a comment. Tell me I'm wrong. But when you're on that roof and you grab a bundle and that slime that gets between the two bundles and it's 12, 13 stacks high, it smells like cat pee. So middle of the afternoon, it's 100 degrees outside. It's 120 on the roof. You're hot. You're sunburned. Everything hurts. You're trying your best to get this thing done by the end of the day so you can wake up and do it again the following day. You smell like cat pee. You've got granules and fiberglass stuck all through your arms. And so 100% nail placement in that common bond is not always the number one thing on your mind. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Cat pee.
Well, to wrap things up, because I think if we keep going, you're in trouble. That doesn't work. Anyway, much of our audience, does not do this every day for a living. They're not contractors. Yeah. Some of our audience might not even be of an age or physical well-being enough to inspect their roof, look at their siding. I'm going to tee you up for this super easy answer. What should they do leading up to... This is the shameless plug part of the episode, okay?
Okay.
In preparing for a storm, and the storm's not imminent, or maybe it's forecast for tomorrow, what should they do? What should I do as a homeowner for these major systems of our house? Roofing, siding, the windows. The smaller stuff, sure. We can throw some stuff in our garage, put some stuff in our basement, tie down bungee cord. Yep. But for the major systems that are protecting me and my family, what's your recommendation?
Call Pro Exteriors.
Nailed it.
But in all reality, if you don't have the ability to do some of this stuff, if you don't have the ability to get on your roof, deal with any sort of siding issues, if you don't have the ability to, cut plywood up and temporarily install it on your house, because also remember, the goal is to not take 3-inch screws and screw through your siding to put this plywood in place. We do have options. We do have little clips that we can use to temporarily put this plywood over your windows. We do have the ability to do that you may or may not. So if you don't have the ability to, properly protect your house, call a professional. We at Pro Exteriors offer these services, and we'll be happy to help you out as best we can. But, feel free to call anybody that's willing to help, honestly. So,
yeah. And let's say you are totally able-bodied. I mean, I'm able to do things for myself, but we didn't even touch on the fact that getting bags of ice or getting water or dry ice or the getting batteries for flashlights, that kind of stuff that it's going to take up our time, especially if a storm is imminent, that we don't need the added headache of all the other stuff that requires some extra skill. So
agreed. Yeah. You're not even talking about the essentials to feed and clothe and do all that stuff after the storm hits. So
I would be remiss if I didn't, before we end, we're recording this in October of 2024. A couple of really nasty storms just hit the southeastern part of our country and up into Tennessee and North Carolina and Florida. And so if you are watching this and you're able to either lend a physical hand down there or find a local organization that's sending supplies, do that. Continue to pray for those people, to reach out to friends and family. It's amazing how just a week or two after a storm, the rest of the world forgets about it, and then those people are still living in the midst of complete I'm at a loss for words. Devastation.
Yeah.
They've lost everything. My cousin down in Asheville, North Carolina, her home was completely submerged in water, and she's 10 years younger than me or so, and she's having to deal with this. So
yeah, it's rough. And when you say weeks, I mean, you hear the horror stories that, certain things are months. And you look at Katrina, when Katrina came through New Orleans down there, I mean, some of those houses, it was years later before they ever got rebuilt.
Yeah.
Because the devastation was so massive. And like you said, your cousin lives down there in Asheville, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were whole areas that we visited as a family in the last couple of years that they're gone.
Yeah.
Little small towns that,
Mm-hmm.
right outside of Asheville, they're gone. I think it was it Waynesboro, North Carolina? Like there was a street that we were on, and we saw the before and after photos, and there's nothing left of that street.
Yeah.
So it's devastating.
Grateful that we live in an area where, we're able to have conversations like this, where it's, more preventative kind of stuff, but didn't want to do an episode on storm preparedness without acknowledging that.
Yep.
Well, that is all we have for you today on the You Ask the Pros Answer podcast. Would you help us get the word out about the show? If you have found this to be useful, would you please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcast? Or if you're watching on YouTube, would you please hit the like button on this video? Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so that you don't miss an upload. We release an episode each Friday. Also, before we go, we want to hear from you. This show does not exist without your questions. Would you please send us any questions you have around home remodeling? Could be about the exterior area of your house or anything related to the construction industry. Send your questions to info@askproexteriors.com and simply put "You Ask" in the subject line. If you are facing an upcoming home project, we hope this episode has empowered you to tackle it with confidence. Remember, knowledge is power, and a little bit of research can go a long way. Until next time, happy homeowning. The You Ask the Pros Answer podcast is produced in-house by the Pro Exteriors team. Pro Exteriors is the exterior contracting division of Empire Construction Group, LLC. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal advice. For more answers to your questions, please subscribe to this channel and podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Do you have an upcoming home remodeling project? Find more answers to your questions at askproexteriors.com.